You are now watching Zach Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, Zach Lesage here. We're going to be going over the second half of our best decks and formats, so decks 11 through 20, to see exactly what's going on. In this video, I will include the best decks in the pinned comment below, so check that out along with reference videos for many of them. If there's not a reference video, I'm likely working on it. Our Brilliant Swords format has been absolutely crazy, and these 11 through 20 seem to shake it up a little bit, so stay tuned for all that great stuff. If you are trying to pick up any of the cards for these decks, go to ptcgeostore.com, plug in code ZLesage5. You can go to atlastcg.com, plug in code ZLesage8 to save 8% on your next order of Pokemon TCG singles. And you can go to metafy.gg/@ZachLesage and get some coaching from me if you want to improve your game today. That being said, let's jump into our number 20 spot. Let's get it. Star birthing its way all the way to number 20 and not on last week's list is Arceus VSTAR with Raichu V. The strategy of this deck revolves around using Arceus V to accelerate energies or using Arceus VSTAR to accelerate energies onto your other Arceus and Raichu. You can search through whatever you want with Starbirth like any other Arceus deck, and that allows you to come up with combos like Choice Belt and Boss's Orders so you can get the correct knockout on your opponent's Pokemon. I think that that's pretty cool. Once you get enough energies in play, you could really just kind of explode with Raichu, ripping some of those energies out of play and hitting hard. It's really all this is. It's very similar to Blacephalon GX of past formats, so we'll have to see how it plays out going throughout the rest. This is one of those decks that I thought was going to be pretty good early on in our format. Didn't really see success, and now it's starting to see a little bit of success. So I do think this deck is better than a top 20 deck. We'll just have to see how the rest of it plays out. Casting its ribbons on number 20 in to tie the Arceus Raichu deck, this Arceus VSTAR Sylveon deck aims to kind of do everything that an Arceus deck always does, is accelerating energies to your other VSTAR, VMAX Pokemon, and then have a suitable attacker. This deck takes all those different techs and plays it with Sylveon VMAX so that you have all the different colored Pokemon on your bench and you're able to hit hard with its Max Harmony attack. I think that the techs here are really cool, and I mean, maybe the Zolmazenta is not necessary because Ice Rider's not seeing all the success in the world, but it is one of those things where this deck is just going to be using Galarian Moltres against a Mew deck, or maybe you're going to be using Yveltal against a deck with special energies, Galarian Zapdos V against another Arceus deck. To me, I wonder if this deck is played because players like Sylveon, and Sylveon's a really cool Pokemon, or if it actually has any merit over a traditional Arceus VSTAR Toolbox deck. So I think it's probably better to play Arceus VSTAR Toolbox as we see in the rankings in the top 10. You can check that out from my video from yesterday. Or we'll just continue to see how this deck goes. I mean, until we get some dual types and we can get some big damage out there, or if there's any way to maximize the Sylveon VMAX a little bit more, I think it's probably going to be appropriately placed towards the bottom half of the top 20 or just outside of it. Rapid It striking it up at number 20, and our third deck tied for number 20 is Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX with Galarian Moltres V. Now, the Rapid Strike Urshifu part of this deck is going to be trying to attack against Pokemon that are weak to fighting, and maybe doing some kind of spread aspects with your Gmax Rapid Flow, Passimian to do an additional 30 to your bench, Telescopic Sight to do additional 30 to their bench, and other things like the quick shooting. I think that's kind of cool. The Galarian Moltres V is going to work on just being a dark type attacker against something like a Mew VMAX deck. Now, to me, I think that this deck is split down the middle and it's two separate decks. I bring it up every single time, and there's actually other better performing Rapid Strike decks pretty much every single week than this deck. I mean, there are a few times where this deck's acceptable to play, but I do think there generally are better fighting and dark Pokemon to play around with. So my idea, play just like a straight up Rapid Strike Urshifu, or maybe just not this particular variant, but otherwise this variant's acceptable. Like, it's a deck, and it's a deck that will do well, but there's just better decks than it, and I think it's appropriately placed in the lower half of the top 20 decks. All the way at number 17, and not making last week's list, is Dragapult VMAX. This deck's all the way using Max Phantom, hitting your opponent's active for 130 and moving 5 damage counters around on your opponent's bench, so putting the 5 there, however which way you like it. You can add up with other Max Phantoms, Quick Shooting, Zigzagoon, so this deck is very similar to the Jolteon deck that did make the top 10. The only real difference here is that you do not have to have the damage on their bench Pokemon. Considering that's not really a problem and that our Dark type weakness is pretty much a glaring issue, this deck to me seems like a worse version of Jolteon right now. Because Mew is weak to Dark, there's naturally going to be some targets in the format or just decks that are trying to beat Dragapult. Right now, I think Dragapult is appropriately positioned at number 17 and could eventually fall off the top 20 list going forward. Galloping all the way to number 17 to tie that last Dragapult deck that we just saw is Arceus VSTAR with Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX and some control and tech elements. This Andrew Zavala creation from Salt Lake City has dropped 5 spots in the past week, and I think it's just because Mew VMAX decks have gotten really strong. If not, like, more players just know how to play that deck out of nowhere. Mew VMAX is always a good deck. Let's just call it that. The goal of this deck is to be able to use Shadow Rider Calyrex V to stop your opponent from attaching special energies. You could also play that with Flannery to discard their special energies in play, and if they do play something like Elsa Sparkles, you can follow it up with a punishment of Cry of Destruction from Yveltal. You have ways to accelerate energies with Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX on your bench to build up a big max guys to get the knockout. You also can accelerate energies with Arceus V, Arceus V-Star, and you have things like Zapdos V to do well against decks that are typically Dark type or weak to fighting. You do well against those or other Arceus variants. This deck's really interesting, and there's a lot of cool choices overall that I would play around with. I just find that this deck's slipping a little bit in our formats, so it's one of those things where as players have kind of seen this deck a couple times, or maybe Mew has just got that much better. There are ways around this deck, and I think that this deck is probably appropriately placed. Could be moving up a little bit, but somewhere between 12 and 17 seems more than acceptable. Swooping into number 15 and dropping from number 9 last week is Dark Toolbox. Now, this is the same list that Mo Ideas was able to use to make top 16 at Salt Lake City Regionals, and I did help them out with a couple of the ideas on the deck, just going through a bunch of one-ofs here and there. Overall, the goal of this deck is to sacrifice Pokemon up so that you could use Galarian Moltres, accelerate energies with its ability, drop it down and use Fiery Wrath after your opponent's drawn some prize cards. You have Galarian Moltres V as a backup to attack things like Mew VMAX out of nowhere with a Raihan. Zigzagoon allows you to get some damage pings down, especially with that quick shooting. You have Hoopa to do some kind of chip damage here and there. And you have Zapdos V that's like okay to just knock out an Arceus V-Star and maybe a Gengar. This deck comes together, but it's a little bit one of those things where, how do I put it? It's just not super consistent. There's a lot of decks at the top that kind of beat it. You have to be incredibly skilled to play this deck as well too. So it might just not be, it's not worth it, I don't think. I think it's probably appropriately placed at number 15. 9 felt a little bit too high. And we've just seen other variants of this deck see a little bit more success. So it's one of those things, it's cool. It's just a little too hard to play for most. Swooping into number 15 and up from number 20 from last week's top 5 best decks list is Gengar VMAX. Now, Gengar VMAX absolutely has seen a lot of success. So the fact that it's this far down tells me that a lot of players were just not playing this week. It has been difficult overall for these rankings because less limitless events are going on now that in real life tournaments are going on. And that's one of those things that we're going to have to see, and maybe I'll have to change the way that I'm doing my rankings. That being said, you want to be accelerating energies with Houndoom onto your Gengar, attacking with Fear and Panic when your opponent has multiple Pokemon V in play, or you go for Gmax Swallow Up to knock out their Pokemon. Morpeko and Stonjourner offer you flexibility in single prize card matchups like Malamar, and are very good against the decks that they have a type advantage against, like Mew VMAX and Arceus V-Star. Tool Jammer allows you to shut off your opponent's choice spells so you can evade some knockouts when you're playing against Mew VMAX. You could also stop Jolteon VMAX from using Elemental Badge. Overall, I think that this deck is currently within the top 3 best decks in the format. It's just not placed there. However, for the sake of this list, it is currently at number 15. It pains me. I think more players need to play this deck and play it correctly because it seems so well positioned in our metagame, especially with Whimsicott on its way up. You can use Houndoom to get around that. It's one of those things, if you are playing for EUIC, hopefully you have this on your list because you can score a lot of CP with this deck. Rapid striking it up to number 13 and up from number 17 last week is Inteleon VMAX Rapid Strike. The goal of this deck is to slap down a Rapid Strike energy onto the Inteleon VMAX, lift it back so you're doing extra damage, and when your opponent doesn't get a knockout on you, you can play one of your 4 Cheryls to heal all that damage off the Inteleon VMAX. The energy's already back to your hand, so you're good to rinse and repeat. You can use things like Drizzle to search out the Cheryl, you can use things like Octillery to search out the Rapid Strike energy, and of course you have Roseanne's backup in order to get back a lot of these different cards. Overall, this deck seems pretty cool. It's underdeveloped or under-tested overall is the best way that I'd look at it. It's one of those decks that I think can see a little bit more success, but it's not one of those mainstream decks that a lot of players are playing. So in order for decks to see success, we need to see more players playing them in general. I think it's okay. It might be a little bit timely, and it's one of those things where its weakness, like Jolteon's still a popular deck, could be an issue, but we do have Manaphy as well. I think this one's worth an extra look and maybe some more testing going forward. Starbirthing it all the way into number 12 and moving from not being even on the list last week is Arceus VSTAR with Malamar VMAX. Now, we've seen this deck poke in and out of the top 10, the top 20, and it seems to me that players are either playing this deck or they're not. There's a lot of Arceus V-Star variants out there. We've gone over that you're trying to accelerate energies onto your Arceus V, your Arceus V-Star, and or your Malamar VMAX. And the whole goal of this deck is no different. You're going to be accelerating energies, searching out whatever you want. This deck's going to be using Malamar VMAX's attack to kind of disrupt your opponent with cards like Marnie, Path to the Peak, and of course the attack itself. This deck very similarly looks like Drew Kennett's winning Gengar VMAX Arceus V-Star list from Salt Lake City. No players are really playing that deck, which is kind of interesting, and they've all kind of gravitated towards this deck. I have added some cool things like Battle VIP Pass. Do I think this deck's a top 10 deck? No, I don't think it's a top 10 deck, but I do think it's probably within the top 15 or so decks, so we'll have to see how it plays out. If you really like this deck, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just one of those, it's just not as well positioned as other decks in our current formats. Rapid striking its way all the way to number 11, and the deck that just barely missed out on our top 10 is Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. Now, this straight up version of the deck is meant to be using Gale Thrust, Gmax Rapid Flow, and it has extra support in order to use that. So as we went over with the Galarian Moltres version of this deck lower down on this list, that deck necessarily cannot do all the cool things that this deck can, or do it as well as it can, because it's also trying to be a Galarian Moltres deck. Cool techs like Galarian Zigzagoon, cool other little techs here and there like Echoing Horn, and just different counts of supporters and trainers and all that kind of good stuff allows this deck to thrive a little bit more. I think this deck is probably fringe top 10. It's not very welcome in the top 10 right now due to the way the metagame is, but I do think Rapid Strike Urshifu is a deck it's worthwhile to kind of have around, try it out, and have, I don't know, it seems good. I don't think it seems bad. I think it seems good. Give this deck a try. Really nothing wrong with Rapid Strike. It's not well positioned in our format all the time. It's like okay. It's appropriately positioned. It's fine. It's you know what I'm saying? We'll see how it goes. But Rapid Strike Urshifu is certainly a solid choice for the 11th place spot. And that's what we got going on for our top 20 best decks list. We have the whole list completed. And if you haven't got a chance to watch yesterday's video, check out yesterday's video to see decks 10 to all the way to number 1. It's going to be amazing. I appreciate all the support on the channel lately, and thank you so much to every single person who leaves a comment below, sparks a discussion, gives a like to boost the algorithm, subscribes, all that. I really appreciate every single person. It's one of those things where I have a few more videos to record, so I'm going to cut it a little bit short here. I'll catch up with everyone later. Have yourself a wonderful week, and stay tuned for some more great content here and on the Shuffle Squad. Peace out and have a great day. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.